Hi, my name is Jerry Thomas, and I'm the President, CEO of Decision Analyst. And today's discussion is an introduction to brand strategy. And when we talk about brands, we're referring to some type of symbol or name or sign that identifies and distinguishes one product from another product or from competitive products. And we can think of this identifies and distinguishes as the tangible function or tangible purpose of a brand. But there are also intangible components of a brand, and we'll talk a lot about those as we get into the series. And intangibles are other kinds of associations or values or linkages to that brand, emotions, imagery, feelings, things that we can classify as intangible. And trademark law has an interesting concept called secondary meaning. And over time, a brand acquires secondary meaning through advertising and through usage. And this secondary meaning is, in effect, a measurement of the culmination of a brand strategy. For example, pull this all together. Caterpillar refers to it's not quite an insect yet, but it refers to a insect-like creature that becomes an insect. And so that's what the word caterpillar means. But the word caterpillar has also acquired secondary meaning as the identity of a brand of earth-moving equipment. And in that context, Caterpillar has acquired massive secondary meaning, and it stands for strength and hardness and progress and construction and diesel clatter and the color yellow. So Caterpillar as a brand has acquired all of this secondary meaning. And so part of brand strategy is all about building the right type of secondary meaning for your brand. So we talked a little bit about brand. When we talk about strategy, we're really talking about the concentration of effort. How do you focus effort, focus energy, focus communication so that you break through all the noise and the clutter? And how do you differentiate your brand? So having a great brand strategy pays huge dividends for a product or a brand or a service. One, you can charge higher prices. You enjoy greater customer loyalty. You have some protection, not complete, but you have some protection from the economic ups and downs of business cycles. You also have some insulation or cushion to protect you against adverse publicity. And it makes all of your advertising investments and marketing investments work better or be more effective if the brand strategy is right. And when we talk about brand strategy, it can be brand strategy for the corporation itself. For example, let's talk about Procter & Gamble. The company owns hundreds of brands and each one has a strategy and a marketing plan to support it. And I'm sure there's also a marketing plan or a branding strategy for the umbrella corporate name Procter & Gamble. So the corporate is a brand too. The company name is a brand. So that's a different strategy. And each individual brand owned by that company has its own strategy. So what are some of the core elements of a brand strategy? At its most basic level, it involves questions such as, who do we target? What's our optimal target market? And how do we position our brand vis-a-vis other brands? How do we differentiate our brand? compared to other brands. What kind of a brand image do we want to project? And what kind of a personality do we want to give our brand or have our brand portray? If it's potato chips, we may want it to be a fun, bouncy type personality. But we're selling caskets, it may be somber and serious. So what kind of an image do we want to project, and what kind of a personality do we want to portray? And what's the level of product quality, and what's the price level? And then all of these elements have to be woven together so that they reinforce each other and we achieve synergy overall. So how do you get to an optimal brand strategy? It's actually quite complicated, and it takes a lot of iterations to get to an optimal brand strategy. And it's a combination of good primary research and strategic vision. So it's research combined with what you, in your heart of hearts, want for your brand strategically. You need both of those elements to create a great strategy. And typically we rely heavily on qualitative research techniques, from ethnography to depth interviews, focus groups, online forums, techniques that allow us to really understand the deeper motivations and perceptions in a product category, and how people feel and think about brands. So this type of research is essential to help us build strategy concepts or positioning concepts. And then it's test and retest and test and retest until we get to an optimal strategy. And that's part of it. And then the other part of it is, what do we want that brand to become long term? So we've got to meld those two things together, what the research is telling us and what your vision is telling you about the future. And those two things have to meld and harmonize. And it's really important to do this strategy research, because if you know your strategy is right, then you can stick with it through thick and thin. You can invest money in it knowing that it's going to pay off in the long term. Many great strategies have been abandoned before they ever have time to work. So it's so important to know that your strategy is right so you can commit to it and invest the advertising dollars to make it come true long term. And one last set of thoughts about execution of a brand strategy. The details of execution can magnify and enrich the strategy. And I'm thinking now of the wonderful example, over 100 years old, of Morton Salt, when they developed a salt that didn't cake up when it was raining, and developed the slogan, when it rains, it pours. But the way they executed that strategy, with the picture of a young girl carrying an umbrella in the rain, apparently carrying home a carton of salt that's pouring, and all of those elements were tied together. But the confidence and the bounce in that little girl's step, and the way she was portrayed, and the energy and the confidence that she portrayed, magnified that whole strategy and pulled it all together. So executional details, research comes back in again to help us tweak and fine-tune and test and retest so that we can harmonize all of these executional details to magnify the overall brand strategy. And one final thought: if brand strategy is right, and if it's consistently pursued, and if the advertising investments are sufficient to break through, over the long term, that brand can become extremely valuable. And many companies, the value of the brands they own, it doesn't show on the balance sheet, but very often the value of those brands is much greater than the paper value of the corporation itself. So there's a great prize in the long term if brand strategy is right.